Hello and welcome. I'm Aleki, and you're watching Stationeers for Beginners. In this episode, we're going to tackle airlocks. Simply put, an airlock is a room that sits between two environments and lets you move from one into the other without mixing their temperatures or atmospheres. Whether that's the vacuum of the moon and the oxygen of your base, the frigid oxygen of Europa's atmosphere and the warm, pleasant oxygen inside your base, the hot, noxious atmosphere on Vulcan or Venus, and the pleasant environment within your own base, or even two separate environments within your base, like a carbon dioxide rich greenhouse where you grow your plants, and a oxygen atmosphere in which you do most of your living. An airlock is going to be the construct that lets you separate these environments. So let's take a look at how to build one. We're going to start with the most basic version of it and incrementally build up to more advanced and featureful versions of it. If you're looking for a specific kind of airlock, down below there are chapters that lets you skip ahead if you already know the basics. Over here, I use the construction crate that's provided in a standard starter kit to build a small room that could be typical of a starter base. And I want to be able to pressurize this with oxygen, make it breathable so I can eat and drink inside, take my suit off, take a shower, whatever else, without losing my gases to the vacuum of the moon. As you can see, the moon, complete vacuum. For that, the starter kit gives you basically everything you need. If you're on a brutal start, you're going to have to get to the point where you manufacture many of these things yourself, as that gives you much more limited gear. But since you're a beginner, let's talk starter gear. On the lander, you have the electrical supplies crate, which we're going to detach using the wrench. And this one we needed because an airlock requires power. It involves vents, so we are going to need a source of power. And there is an airlock supplies crate, which has a lot of the specialized equipment needed for an airlock. Now that we got both of those off, let's see what we have in here. Of particular importance from the electrical kit, we have an area power controller, we have extra cable coils, and we have batteries. And in the airlock supplies, we have an active vent, a console, two door kits, an airlock board, a passive vent, a labeler, a data disk, sensors kit, and some piping. So before we start setting any of those up, I'm going to grab the crate and take it with us, we need to put together some walls for the airlock. What kind of walls you use is entirely up to you. Essentially, you want a 1x1 box. So this little gap that I left here is where the airlock is going to be. We're going to need a left wall, right wall, and a roof so that it's airtight. And then the two doors are going to go on the front and the back, connecting the outside with the inside of the base. Now for the walls, you can use frames, you can use walls, you can use windows, whatever you'd like. The vents and other items that we need to mount inside the airlock can be mounted on any of them. So let's use a little bit of a mix. For the top of the airlock, I like using a frame because that lets me place other things on top, for example, solar panels. And let's put one more frame on the side. This other side though, let's do a window to have a nice view from our airlock. Now, those need to be built. And how to do that is something I covered in the construction episode. From the airlock supplies crate, I grabbed the vents, the piping, and the doors. And from the electrical crate, I grabbed one of the two area power controllers that the standard start gives you, and the large battery. The doors come in various variants, and you can switch between them by scrolling the mouse wheel. For the most basic version, we're going to use this manual hatch. It does not have data or power connections, and as the name implies, it's manually operated. We're going to build them on both sides of the airlock. For that, we're going to need some iron sheets to finish them up. But let's set up some of the other things first. The active vent is going to serve to draw any gases that get into the airlock back into the base. Because we're on the moon and we have a vacuum on the outside, we only need a one-sided airlock. So I'm going to place it over on the side near the base door. And then I'm going to take some pipes and run them through inside the base like this. Then, at the end of the pipes, I'm going to place the passive vent. This vent is going to require power. So I'm going to put the area power controller, and by scrolling the mouse wheel on this, you can select which direction you want it to be transferring power in. So this one, I will set it to go from right to left. And using a crowbar, I'm going to open it up and add the battery and flip it on. Now, where the power comes from is not critical. You don't strictly have to have an area power controller within the airlock. I like doing it like this because the airlock is a room I can access both from inside the base and outside the base. So if the battery runs out in the area power controller, I can swap another one in. Or if the battery in my suit runs out, I could swap for the one in the APC. So it's very handy to be able to access it from both sides. But that's up to you where you actually bring the power in from. Now we're going to connect the power to the vent. And setting this to inward, meaning that, so when it says set outward, it means that the vent is actually pulling inward. And inward means from the atmosphere of the room into the vent and the pipe connected to it. And if I turn it on, it does work. Obviously, we're in a vacuum, there's nothing for it to pull. I grab the iron sheets, and with a welder, I'm gonna finish the hatches. Make sure you only weld these one time, because if you weld it a second time, you're gonna be welding it permanently shut. Obviously, you can undo that, but it will not let you pass through easily. So with these manual airlocks, you click on this big round wheel, the door opens. And then you can click the door to close it. Now we have 3 separate environments: the room, the airlock, and the outside. Now, closing the outside door of the airlock, I added some atmosphere in this room. As you can see, it's holding at about 6.93 kilopascals. So we don't have any leaks. To use the airlock, I'm going to get into the airlock, close the inside door, and run the vent until there is no atmosphere in the airlock. Then I can open the door to the outside. To get in, I'm going to do most of these steps in reverse. To get in, close the door, and you could use the vent to pull atmosphere in, but that's not really needed. Unless you have a pretty high pressure in your base, you can just open the door and the pressure will equalize. If the pressure inside your base is quite large, let's say maybe 50 kilopascals, 100 kilopascals, something like that, then you're going to get a fairly strong wind that might blow any loose items at you or even push you back. So you may want to consider drawing oxygen, or drawing the atmosphere in, if that's the case for you. Personally, I mostly just open the door. Now let's take a look at how we can improve on this airlock. If you already have your base built and an atmosphere present, you can even upgrade it without losing that atmosphere. You just have to make sure you start from the inside and you bring all the materials you're going to need. So the first step to upgrade would be improving on the doors. For that, I made sure to grab the glass and plastic sheets because we're going to be replacing the manual hatches with composite doors. I'm going to start with the outside hatch closed and disassemble the inside one. Now, I'm going to set up a composite door instead of the hatch. The difference between composite door and glass door is that the glass door does not allow pipes and cables to pass on as many sides of it. It mostly allows that just at the top. Whereas the composite door is smaller, doesn't give you as much clearance to move items through it, and doesn't look quite so nice, but it allows you to more easily pass piping and cables around it. So for this we will do composite doors. The composite door requires a welding torch and plastic, and then a crowbar and glass sheet. And there we have it. That's a composite door. With a crowbar, you can force it open even if it's unpowered, and force it closed. So now I can pump the atmosphere back into the base, and do the exact same thing to replace the outside hatch without losing any of the gases. Make sure when you place the doors, they have these daytime power ports pointing to the inside of the airlock, meaning that they are part of the airlock's cube, not that they are part of the outside. That's going to make connecting them a lot easier. Now we have an airlock that has composite doors on both sides. But without connecting these to power, we didn't exactly achieve much. We just made it harder to get through the doors because we have to use the crowbar. The benefit of moving up to composite doors or glass doors is you can connect them to daytime power. That doesn't really achieve much in itself, because once they're connected to power, you essentially have the same thing you could do with manual airlocks. Basically push on an interaction surface and open or close the door. And now they're also consuming a little bit of power. So in a way, so far it's a bit of a downgrade. The benefit is that we can now control the airlock with a board. In the airlock kit, you have a consoles kit, and an airlock board, and a data disk. The consoles kit will allow you to cycle the airlock automatically. So place that on the wall, put the airlock board inside it, then add a glass sheet to close it. And we need to connect this to the daytime power network. On the left side of it, there is a slot where you can insert the data disk. And if you turn it on, it is ready to be programmed. To make it easier to program airlocks, it's also useful to take the labeler and name your doors and your vents. We also need to add the sensors kit, because that's what allows the control board to detect whether there's any atmosphere inside the airlock or not. So the sensor kit, you're going to want to cycle with the mouse wheel to go to the gas sensor, and then we will connect that to the network as well. Now using the labeler, let's label the doors so we can tell them apart. All I'm going to do is add composite door out and composite door in. What you name them to doesn't matter so long as it makes sense to you. Looking at the configuration of the airlock board, now we need to pick a gas sensor, the in and out doors, and the vent. So the gas sensor is obvious. There's only one gas sensor. We're going to click on that. And it turning green like that indicates that it is linked to the sensor. For the doors, it says exterior. So first we need to pick the exterior door. So composite door out is our exterior door. Click on that. So that's linked as well. Now it wants the interior door. And we're going to click on composite door in. And then it wants the active vent. And with that, we have all the essential parts. The control panels on the door have turned red and have this lock icon, indicating that they are controlled by the airlock board. Now, if we pull the data disk out, the airlock should work. You can click on the cycle to interior, and it should cycle. Close the outside door, and now it is trying to pressurize. it's trying to pull atmosphere in here, and slowly is, but if you remember, inside the base we only have about 7 kilopascals. Even if we brought all that atmosphere in here, it would not be enough. This board assumes that you're gonna bring in an atmosphere of 101 kilopascals, what the game considers standard pressure for your base. You don't have to have that pressure. 20 kilopascals of partial oxygen pressure is sufficient, but there is not enough oxygen in that room to bring it in. So unfortunately, this is a big limitation of the basic airlock board. It does not allow you to customize the pressures. Right now, it's going to try, and it will never manage to pressurize this airlock because there simply is not enough gas in our base. If this happens to you, you can hit cancel pressurize, and the door will open immediately. If we added more gas in there, where it could actually build up the pressure to 101, then it would cycle by itself. For this reason, I highly recommend just using the advanced airlock board as soon as you can produce one. That one we will see in the next chapter, and it does allow you to customize the pressure that you are aiming to fill the airlock to from both sides. Like basically the expected pressure of both sides that it should equalize to. Now, to go outside, we go in, hit cycle to exterior. It's gonna push everything in, and we can go out. Now, another approach to the airlock is, instead of hitting cycle to interior, we can click this locked keypad, which, being linked to the airlock control, will trigger a cycle as well. The nice thing is, you can even hit these from outside. Just be careful, if your airlock is not capable of cycling on its own because of the lack of pressure, that will get it stuck, because it will just be trying to pressurize to cycle itself, and without you in here to hit cancel pressure, it will never actually manage to do it. I grabbed some oxide and let it melt in the room, so now we have 129 kilopascals in here, and we can see how the board is actually supposed to work. We jump in the airlock, cycle to exterior, and it is emptying. It will take longer because there is more gas, but when it's done, the door opens. We get back in, cycle to interior, and now it will actually be able to reach 101 kilopascals. It does take a bit, and later on in this video we're going to take a look at how we can speed up this process. But there it is, 101, and the door opens. Now we can also safely cycle the airlock from the exterior panels. This can be handy if you happen to die outside the base, so the airlock is cycled to the outside, but your respawn point is inside the base, situations like that, or if you have multiple entrances and exits to your base, then you may need to cycle the airlock without you being inside it. So be cautious that the board that you're using for the airlock is actually capable of cycling it without you in there. There it is, almost full, and it will open. Now we jump over to Mars, where I built an almost identical setup. On Mars and other planets with an atmosphere, you want an airlock that can separate gases on both sides. That means we're going to need a vent pumping back out the atmosphere in both directions. 2 active vents. Unfortunately, the starter kit for Mars only gives you 1 active vent, 1 passive vent, and it gives you a regular airlock board, which is not suited to what you need here. With that in mind, my approach to building an airlock on Mars is to quickly get my industry up and running and use the pipe bender to make an extra active vent and an extra passive vent. In place of the passive vent, you can also use a pipe cowl, though it requires the same amount of materials, so there's not much benefit to it. The main difference is that the passive vent has to be mounted on the surface, while the cowl can just stick out at the end of a pipe. Let's use a cowl this time just to see it in action. I also decided to use the glass doors on Mars, And that presents us with extra wiring and piping challenges. If I grab the wires, and with the wire cutters in the other hand, I can pass wires all along the top of a glass door, but I cannot pass them at the sides or bottom. That means the power has to come in at the top, and the gases have to go out at the top. For that purpose, I put my APC up near the top, and to connect it to a source of power, I can do something like this. In fact, up here on the outside, I have a wire that is coming down from what could be a solar panel up on the frame. I also have it connected to a second APC that's serving the industrial area. Now that we brought in power, we need to place the vents. One of them has to take gases back into the base. We can put it like that. And one has to take them out into the atmosphere. Since we can pass pipes at the top of the doors, we're going to do something like this. And add the passive vent at the end, just like we did on the moon. On the other side, let's run this pipe upwards. And since we're using a cowl, I can just cap the pipe with that, and that will connect it to the atmosphere. Now we have two functioning vents, one pointed to each side. And with that, the base is ready to be pressurized and the airlock to be used in manual mode. So, I'm gonna grab the oxygen tank and some oxide and pressurize the base. I got some atmosphere in the base, 38 kilopascals. So now I can use the airlock in manual mode. Close the inner door, make sure the vent is pointed inward, so the mode button should say set outward. And pump the atmosphere from the airlock back into the base. And open the outer door. Get in, I close the outer door. Make sure the vent is in the proper mode, and pump out the outside atmosphere so we don't contaminate the base. Then I can open the inside door. Okay, let's quickly use the labeler and separate our in and out vents and in and out doors. So this is the active vent in, and the active vent out, glass door out, and glass door in. In the setup of the regular airlock board, I can set up an exterior door, an interior door, a sensor, but it only wants one vent. If I try to set up both vents, it gets confused. I'm not sure what it's trying to do here. Apparently it's trying to bring in outside atmosphere to some unspecified pressure. Probably it tries to reach 101 kilopascals by sucking in Mars atmosphere. This is not gonna work. If you're aware of some clever way to use the basic airlock board between two atmosphere like on Mars, let me know in the comments, because I haven't figured out a good way, and I don't think there is a good way to create a reasonable airlock with it. Why they included it, I'm not sure, because you might as well not have it. Okay, so let's take that out. And in the process of removing that, we also tainted the inside of the base a little bit. So yeah, now we have some carbon dioxide in there. Not the end of the world. To rip up a console, use the crowbar to pull the glass out, and then you can grab the board back out. We'll leave the disc in the console because we will still use those for the advanced airlock. Be careful disassembling this while it is linked to the doors, because you can leave the doors locked up, thinking they are still controlled by an airlock board that is no longer set up. So that happens to you, reassemble the console and unlink the doors. Now they're unlocked for manual mode. And you can take this back apart. But since you watched this video, there's no point to even try using that basic board. So we will manually pump the atmosphere back in and go outside. To make an advanced airlock board, you're going to need the electronics printer. That does not come in the kit. In fact, the hydraulic pipe bender didn't come in the kit either. I had to make it on the auto lathe. So you do need to get your industry up and running. If you need some help with that, I do have an episode of this series on manufacturing, which is linked in the card above. Once you have the electronics printer up and running, the advanced airlock board only requires pretty basic materials and in small amounts. 1 gram of iron, 5 grams of gold, 5 grams of copper. So it's something you can produce pretty early if you want an automated airlock on a planet with atmosphere. With the board made, let's get it set up inside the airlock. It goes in the console just as the regular airlock board, followed by a piece of glass to close the console. Then, if we turn this on with the disk in for configuration, you'll see we have extra options. On the advanced airlock board, we can set external and internal pressures. Those are the pressure that it will try to bring in to equalize before opening the door. Now, the ambient on Mars is only 2 kilopascals. We can easily set the external to 0. And the internal, I believe we had something like 30 in there. So let's set it to 25. Good enough. Then we need to link the vents, the doors, and the sensors. So first it wants the exterior. So we'll put the active vent out first. Then it wants interior, active vent in. Then it wants exterior for door, glass door out. Interior for door, glass door in. And the sensor. The order in which you do this doesn't exactly matter, so long as you pay attention to the exterior and interior prompts. It'll always want the exterior linked in each category first before it prompts you for the interior. That only applies to vents and doors, since the sensor is just a single sensor. Now we can take out the programming disk and actually cycle the airlock. We're gonna close, vent out the atmosphere, start bringing in atmosphere from inside the base. We'll climb to that 25 kilopascals that we configured, then open the door. And to go out, we can cycle to exterior. We're going to vent out the airlock and open the door, since the outside pressure we requested is 0 kilopascals. So, as you can see, it's much more flexible, lets you configure the pressures. Even on a place like the moon, as soon as I have the electronics printer, I would rather use the advanced airlock board rather than the basic one if I'm gonna have an automated airlock. But as you've seen, the airlock takes quite a while to pressurize, and this is just with the target pressure of 25 kilopascals. So, how can we make that faster? To speed up pressurization, on either side, we want to increase the volume of the pipe between the active vent and the passive vent connecting it to the atmosphere. The reason for this is the game works in ticks. Every tick, the room is going to equalize in pressure with the pipe, and the active vent is going to grab gases from the pipe and push them into the airlock. The thing is, the active vent can push quite a bit of gas, so it'll mostly instantly empty the entire pipe, pushing it into the airlock, but the atmosphere will not balance with the room until the next tick. That slows everything down. So one way to make this faster is to increase this volume. And a simple way to do that is to add some of the utility tanks. Those are made with a kit pipe utility gas, which you make on the hydraulics pipe bender. And you can add a tank like that. To make it even faster, I'm gonna add quite a few of them. Of course, you can have a much nicer setup, use a larger tank or something like that. Now, let's see how quickly it pressurizes. First, we're gonna go to the exterior, and then we're gonna cycle back to interior. Last time, it took roughly 19 to 20 seconds for it to pressurize this airlock. I haven't changed any settings since then. Let's see how it does now. Much faster. In fact, that was so quick that I had to pause the recording and go back in slow motion through the video. It took less than 3.5 seconds to pressurize now. So down from about 20 seconds to about 4 seconds. That's a 5 times improvement just by adding a few fairly cheap tanks. One word of warning for any setup like this where you have pipes or tanks that are half in and half out is that these will exchange heat both with the outside atmosphere and the inside one. Meaning the heat in your base is going to get lost to the environment through these tanks and pipes. Or if you're on a hot planet like Venus or Vulcan, setting things up like this is going to cause your base to heat up from the outside. On Mars, with the thin atmosphere that's only 2 kilopascals, the heat exchange is going to be fairly slow. However, when you go to Europa, Venus, or Vulcan, somewhere with high pressure and a high temperature difference compared to your base, the heat gained or lost is going to happen a lot faster. So just keep that in mind when you're building your airlocks or any other pipe networks. But what can we do to make this airlock even fancier? For one, we can add the battery charger, which comes in the starter kit, to the inside of the airlock. This would allow you to have a couple of batteries always charging, ready to be used from inside or outside the base. You can connect the charger to either the inside, in which case it will drain from the APC to charge the batteries, or you can connect it to the source side, which is what I prefer to do, so that it charges in parallel with the battery in the APC. Another addition I sometimes make to airlocks is to put a shelf. This gives 5 item slots, which is good for storing a few items that may be needed from inside or outside the base. Saves on a trip through the airlock. For example, a labeler can be a useful tool both inside and outside the base. The locker kit that you will need to assemble this is produced on the auto lathe. Another addition we can make is putting a light so that we get a little bit of illumination. Particularly useful if you do not use windows when building your airlock, or if it's night outside. We wire that into the power and data network. And the airlock board even has the ability to link the light. Now, when we cycle the airlock, the light is gonna turn on. Pretty fancy. But what if you don't yet have a base that is ready to be pressurized to use your airlock with? In a pinch, a partially built airlock can be used as a somewhat safe environment in which to take that first drink. Particularly useful on brutal starts, where you're gonna need more time to get set up. You need the outside vent built, and of course an airtight airlock. Then vent out the atmosphere. That's gonna take a little bit on Venus. And meanwhile, prepare your food and drink in your hands. Now that it's a vacuum, it is far less damaging to your lungs to quickly open your helmet in a vacuum than it would be to open it in the scorching, poisonous atmosphere outside. So, you can quickly unlock, open, drink, eat, and close the helmet. Even though I did that on Stationeer difficulty, the damage to the lungs is not critical. I wouldn't recommend using this as your typical way to eat, but it's a way you could use your initial airlock for a way to get your first drink or two. And if you want a completely safe environment, then you can use the second vent in a canister holder along with a canister to actually oxygenate your airlock temporarily. For that, I'm gonna connect the vent to a canister holder, which is made from the pipe utility kit. You do need a pipe bender for that. Then we grab the oxygen tank and an empty canister, also made on the pipe bender. Close up and vent the airlock. And once we have a vacuum, we can release some of the oxygen from the tank into the airlock. You only need 20 kilopascals of pure oxygen. Then pop the canister in the canister holder. And meanwhile, you could open your helmet. Perfectly safe in 22 kilopascals of 15 degrees Celsius oxygen. You could leisurely eat or drink, do whatever you need. Then, when you're done and want to head outside, in order to not waste the oxygen, you can use the vent to pump all the oxygen into the canister. Then you have a canister with about 2 megapascals, depending on how much oxygen you released into the airlock, that you can reuse next time. Next time you want to eat or drink, you can pop that canister back in, set the vent to out, pump the oxygen back into the airlock, and once again, you have a safe environment. Not a very easy way to do it, but in a pinch, this will do. If you want to see other similar uses of an airlock that I've made on my Europa Brutal Start, check out that series, which is linked in the card above. Oh, and if you are on a very hot or cold planet, make sure that the canister in which you store your oxygen, you keep it inside your jetpack. Otherwise, it's going to get hot or cold based on the environment once you get out of here. If you found this video helpful, please remember to give it a like. That will immensely help the channel, as well as get guides like this in front of more people who might be considering playing Stationeers but giving up because they are hitting a wall on concepts like airlocks. Thank you for watching. Lecky out.